I've been wanting to do this video for quite a while because the stats in Cataclysm change quite a lot, and not even in Cataclysm, it's in the pre-patch when these changes obviously take effect. And during the pre-patch, which we have no idea how long it's going to be yet, I'd guess 6 to 8 weeks. Quite honestly, I do think it's going to be a longer pre-patch than what we used to. And in that pre-patch, understanding how the stats work and getting your head around them early is obviously going to be a good thing. But why wait till then when I can tell you all about them right now? Now, there's lots of stats that get removed from gear, and instead you acquire them in different ways. So while you'll be like, oh, attack power's gone, that's weird. Well, actually, you're just getting attack power from the places where you're meant to get attack power from. So currently in Wrath of the Lich King, depending on what class you are, depends on how much attack power you get from 1 point of agility or 1 point of strength. But ultimately, you're getting attack power from those stats. But then also you get attack power thrown on items as well, which is kind of pointless. Why do you need attack power twice? Now, there's tons of stats and skills that get removed, so we're going to dive right in. But before we do, if you haven't already got your Rested XP Cataclysm guide pre-ordered from the link in the description or the pinned comment, then make sure you do. It is an affiliate link, so every guide you buy goes towards supporting the channel, and if you watch me streaming over on Kick, you'll know that I'm actually zooming through the levels using the beta version of the Rested XP guide at the moment, so definitely worth it. And remember, any guides you've got for Wrath won't work because the world changes drastically from 1 to 60. So firstly, what sort of stats are you going to see on gear? None of that changes too much. You're still going to see stamina, intellect, spirit, strength, agility, hit, expertise, crit, haste, the stats that you're used to, as well as defensive stats like block rating and parry, or even resilience for PvP, and of course everything's got armor. But there is one new stat, and that new stat is mastery. Now, in the pre-patch, mastery is actually going to be available, which some people are probably a little bit surprised at maybe. But to actually learn mastery, it just comes from the trainer, and it requires level 80. Now, whilst there's going to be no mastery on the redesigned ICC gear, because the gear will, of course, change, because using Deathbringer's Will as an example, Armor Pen is one of the items that's removed, so that is replaced. And there'll be lots and lots of examples in ICC where gear changes, but I will cover that quite extensively in a future video. But reforging should be in the pre-patch as well, so when that hits, you're now going to be able to actually reforge mastery onto your gear. And because of the way the stats work, actually, at level 80, 40% of your stats going into mastery is going to be a decent amount of mastery, because obviously that will diminish between 80 and 85 as you're expected to have more mastery per point. Now, they're the basic stats that you will see on gear in Cataclysm, so straight away, I think it's fairly obvious on what ones are missing. Starting with the tanking ones first. You'd have noticed that I said block rating and parry, but what I didn't say was shield block value or defense. Now, both of these stats actually get removed completely. So if you can't actually get shield block value, how do you increase the amount of damage that you're going to block? Well, actually in Cataclysm, the block mechanic changes completely. Instead of blocking a flat amount of damage, you'll always block 30% of the damage, but obviously how often you block is going to come from block rating, not value, and rating is still on gear. There are ways to block more than 30% of the damage from talents or glyphs, or even mastery for, like, let's say a protection warrior, because the protection warrior's mastery is critical block, so this increases your chance to block by 12% as base, and your chance to critically block by 12%. Each point of mastery increases your block chance by an additional 1.5% and your critical block chance by an additional 1.5%. So a critical block is probably as you expect. When the warrior blocks, it's not now going to reduce the damage by 30%. Instead, it's going to reduce the damage by 60%. Staying on the theme of tanks, defense is gone completely as well now. We know up until this point there's always been a magic number of defense that you need to reach so you can't be critically hit by the boss. Well, now with defense gone, all you need is your talents. Druids, DKs, paladins and warriors will all have a talent in their tanking tree which will reduce the chance to be critically hit by 6%. So there's no need for defense on gear. So as tanks, you'll likely be stacking mastery, for example, because ordinarily as a tank your mastery is going to reduce the damage you take in some way, shape or form. Then we've also got attack power and spell power. We might as well tackle both of these together because as DPS or even healers, normally this is something that you're really looking for a lot of. Attack power will now only come from either strength or agility, and there's next to no items in the game with attack power on at all. I say next to none because there actually is a couple knocking about, I believe, but nothing you're going to be worried about trying to get. Now, spell power has also been removed completely on all gear except for weapons. So on a weapon, you'll still get a big chunk of spell power, but you won't find it on many other pieces of gear at all. Spell power now just comes from intellect instead. So you can see it makes it really simple. As a caster, DPS, or a healer, you're looking for lots of intellect. As, let's say, a warrior, a paladin, a DK, you're looking for lots of strength. And for the more agile classes like ferals, rogues, hunters, enhancement shamans, you're looking for lots of agility. MP5 has also completely gone from gear. Instead now it's replaced with spirit. And there's lots of places where you can actually see quite a big change for this, even in the pre-patch. Looking at the Sons of Hodir shoulder enchant, for example, where before this was spell power and MP5, it's now actually giving intellect and spirit. Now, spirit is a great stat for two reasons. Firstly, spirit is what gives you your MP5. It's where you get your regen from as a healer, or I mean, to a certain extent, a DPS, as in a caster DPS. But for the hybrid specs, they wanted to make life a little bit easier. So where at the moment you'd have to carry two completely different sets of gear around as a priest if you wanted to switch from, let's say, disc into shadow, because you'd need the hit cap, of course. So you'd need hit on your gear. Now, whilst hit on gear does exist, and it's still needed by other casters like mages and warlocks, well, all the caster hybrid DPS actually benefit from spirit slightly different, because there will always be a talent in that tree, so either as a boomy, an Ellie shaman, a shadow priest, where the spirit will convert into a certain amount of hit. So it's very easy as a healer just to quickly switch on the fly to your DPS spec and know you're already going to be hit capped, and it means you've got to carry less gear around. Don't get me wrong, you'd probably still want to carry maybe trinkets or maybe even a weapon, but it's still a great change if you're a hybrid class who likes to play both roles now and again. Now, when the pre-patch hits, one big one that you're going to notice almost immediately if you're something like a feral druid or a combat rogue or anybody else who enjoys using armor penetration is there is no armor penetration. Or at least there's no armor penetration on gear. There's certain talents or even abilities that allow you to bypass a certain amount of armor or reduce the boss's armor by normal means like Sunder, Fairy Fire, things like that we already know, but actually you're only reducing it by 12% and you only need one source of that. What I mean by that is you no longer need Fairy Fire and Sunder, for example. Fairy Fire or Sunder will work. I could have just said they don't stack. That would have probably been easier. But like I say, there are still some things like Colossus Smash for a warrior, for example, which allows you to bypass armor, but armor penetration as a whole has gone from gear completely. Now, the armor pen will be replaced with either crit or haste, and it's probably worth touching on how haste actually changes while we're at this point. Because if your armor pen changes into haste, haste now actually increases the rate at which you regen your energy. Now, this wouldn't just be exclusive to rogues. Of course, feral druid will regen energy quicker the more haste they've got, as will DKs regenerate their runes quicker as well. Best way to think about it is any resource that you've got, even focus as a hunter, which focus replaces your mana bar as a hunter in Cataclysm. This will also regenerate faster based on haste. So any primary resource your class uses that isn't mana will generate quicker the more haste you have. In terms of stats, something else that you'll notice is a lot of colors change for stats from dual crafting, but I will go into that in a lot of detail in the actual dual crafting video, which will be out hopefully in the next week or two. But I've got to admit, it can get a little bit confusing when you've been so used to a specific gem being a specific color, and then you'll go to the auction house and it's not there anymore. But I would say for stats, that's really about it. That's what gets removed. That's how you can benefit from certain stats. And I touched on reforging, but if you want to know a little bit more about it, when you're either in Orgrimmar for Horde or Stormwind for Alliance, you can head over to these locations here and you can speak to this guy and you'll be able to change 40% of a stat on one of your pieces of gear to a chosen stat. Now, that's really important. Obviously, you can't change it into primary stats. You could only change, let's say, crit to haste, or crit to mastery, or haste to hit, or haste even to spirit, because spirit's a bit of an outlier. That does still count as like a secondary stat. But what I've heard a lot of people talking about is the fact that they don't like the RNG behind reforging, which really confused me when someone actually brought it up on Discord, and I was like, what RNG? And they actually compared it to Diablo, and I just had no idea what they was talking about. So if you think that reforging is random, as in you reforge some stats off and you get a random stat in its place, that's not how it works. Now, I appreciate a lot of people will know how it works, so if I'm teaching you how to suck eggs, I'm sorry, but actually there are people who are not sure. The reforging system is brand new to them. So you choose the desired stat. If you want to get rid of 40% of your crit strike off of an item, you'll simply pick from all the other stats that are available that you want to actually put onto the gear. Obviously, every time you reforge, it does cost gold per item, and if you want to completely restore it back to its original state, that's actually free. Overall, I'd say that's kind of an extensive look at the stats and how they work and what classes use what stats and how you can get mastery and how reforging works. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please, before you leave, make sure you like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And as I say, check the rest of XP, link out in the description, and I'll see you on the next one.